All right, I'll call the committee back to order. And we are on the ensure government procurement and contracting maximize benefit to residents and businesses. And I have a member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can we remove Walmart from the business incentive program list?
Thank you, member for Yellowknife North. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am going to let my Minister of ITI answer that one. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Minister for ITI.
So as I previously said, I commit to looking at the BIP policy to ensure and see what I can do to fix the errors that have been pointed out by the regular members and others to me. I don't want to speak to a specific company at this time. However, I continue to commit to updating the member as it progresses. And if we start cutting people, I promise the member Walmart will be one of the first. How's that? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister for ITI. Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. And I guess this relates to the point of increasing the number of registered businesses by 20%. I've been looking through the registered BIP companies, and I just can find companies that I know are Southern companies and no longer have 51% Northern ownership. So I guess this is just a comment to the Minister of ITI. I don't want your department to go and increase this by 20% as the end game. We may in fact end up exactly where we are once we cut a lot of the grandfathered companies or conduct a review of companies that have since moved south. So just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, member for Yellowknife North. I'll take it as a comment, and I'm going to ask if there are any further questions on ensure government procurement and contracting maximizes benefits to residents and business. Seeing none, we will move to page 23. Adopt a benefit retention approach to economic development. Questions? Member for Cam Lake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just looking at the number of partnerships, the very last on what we will do, increase opportunities for equity participation, and looking at ways that we can also leverage maybe federal dollars in order to do some more economic development and infuse money into our local economy by creating more opportunities for local businesses. I was really excited when I heard the Housing Minister today talk about actually putting someone within the Housing Corp in charge of leveraging those federal dollars. Is that something that other departments are going to be looking at as well, to make sure that with all the money that is coming out of the Liberal government, that we're doing, putting our best foot forward to make sure that we're getting some of those dollars, that we're, accessing the guardianship program, that we're accessing money for Indigenous languages, that we're accessing all these different federal dollars that have the potential to come our way. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, member for Cam Lake. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. Like I had said earlier before, we're developing a federal engagement strategy. When we're talking intergovernmental, it means the federal, it means Indigenous governments, it means municipal governments, it means other jurisdictions. We need to put our best foot forward. We need to continue advocating for money for the Northwest Territories. And not only that, we're actually challenging and saying we'd like 100% dollars now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Cam Lake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under the second point here, it says conduct an independent review. How independent will that review be? Thank you.
Thank you, member for Cam Lake. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Independent is my understanding, and the Cabinet's understanding at this point now is that independent means outside of government. An independent review, a private contractor to do the reviews. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Cam Lake. Are there any other questions? Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I want to follow up on my colleagues' questions about the independent review of competitiveness of the N.W.T mining regime. as far as I know, ITI has hired a contractor for $300,000, and this was work that was started in the last assembly, to do a report that basically repeats methodology from a previous report and maybe adds a few bells and whistles, but I think that's supposed to be done by March 31st, and that's great. That might provide some fodder for this independent review, but what is the role of the public going to be in this review? Or is this just going to be a consultant doing a report, giving advice to ITI? Look, ITI has an inherent conflict of interest in doing this work. They are a department that is responsible for promoting mining, and I've always given them credit. They do a great job at that. But you can't have that department in charge of regulating it and looking at benefits at the same time. It's just an inherent conflict of interest. They're advocating for industry, and that's part of their job. So what is the role of the public going to be in this independent review? Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member for Frame Lake, Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd have to get back to the member on how the public could enroll in this one. However, I can commit that, like I had said earlier, that we are committed to working better with all members of the Legislative Assembly, and therefore, once we get the independent review, we will provide, we will let Standing Committee know, and we will discuss this with Standing Committee. That is my commitment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, and I appreciate that commitment. And this is not just coming from me. This was a recommendation from the Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment in the last Assembly. During the review of the Mineral Resources Act, in that report, and also in the transition report that the Standing Committee brought forward, this needs to be an independent review. It cannot be left to the department alone and a consultant. Look, when Alberta reviewed its royalty regime and way of retaining benefits from oil and gas, what they did was they appointed a blue ribbon panel of experts. They went out, had public hearings. They commissioned some of their own work. That kind of independent review has never been done because the federal government wouldn't do it. We've taken this on since devolution and done nothing with it. And we owe it to our citizens to make sure that we're retaining the right amount of benefits from this. And I'm just going to give a couple of examples. $30 billion worth of diamonds have left the Northwest Territories. $30 billion worth. We have a heritage fund that's $26 million. We started the heritage fund way too late, and I know there are other benefits that we've accrued from diamond mining, but when we're actually raising more money from tobacco and alcohol sales than we are from resource revenues, that's a problem. Because there's $1 billion worth of diamonds leaving here every year, and all we're retaining in resource revenues is around 30, 40, 50 million dollars. That's not good. That's not good enough. That's not what our citizens deserve. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Frame Lake. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I will, like I said, I committed to sharing it with Standing Committee and getting feedback on this. The other thing that I should note is that when the member brought up the issue of the resource royalties, we share that with Indigenous governments. So Indigenous governments will be part of this review. We will make sure that they are all part of this as well. They are our partners in this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Frame Lake.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, look, I'm fine having this $300,000 spent to redo the study, but there are lots of other international examples that we can and should be looking at in terms of benefit retention. Norway has a pension fund that is now over $1 trillion because of the way they manage their North Sea oil and gas, North Sea oil in particular. They also had state ownership of part of it through Statoil. So there's lots of examples that we can and should be learning from around the world, not just repeating some of the mistakes that have been made in Canada around resource development. So it needs to be a well-rounded review that does engage and involve the public and looking at international best practices as well. I want to go to one other item, if I can, in here, Madam Chair, and it's the socioeconomic forum that's mentioned in the middle item. I do think that that's a good idea, but I would hope that the participation in that can be extended beyond just the mining industry and Indigenous governments and N.W.T. I think there's others that have an interest and perhaps stake in this. There's people in academia that have looked at this before. Maybe some NGOs might have some thoughts or ideas. So are we going to try to find a way to make this a little more inclusive than the way it's portrayed here? Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Frame Lake. Madam Premier?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. This one is, the member is correct. This one overlaps into many different, not only the public, but also into many departments. So this one will have an interest in all of the departments, applicable departments for this as well. And we will engage with all applicable stakeholders in this work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Premier? All right, so are there any further questions to adopt a benefit retention approach to economic development? Seeing none, committee, we will move to page 24. Improve early childhood indicators for all children. Questions? Member for Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you. I'd like to ask about the third point, which talks about expanding community-based family-friendly programming beginning this summer. And so I'm unclear about whether this is a new program or whether this is an existing program that's being expanded. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Yellowknife Centre. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some of this will be building on like the Healthy Families program. We know that that needs to be built on, but also I'm a huge advocate. The member knows that my degree is in social work and that I'm a huge advocate on early childhood development. It is a part of the answer. Education is the next answer. This one for sure will be looking at, we're looking at items like community-led initiatives such as parenting, cultural camps. I'm not going to put boxes around and say this is what we're going to define it as. It's about community-led initiatives to support families and children. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you for that, Madam Premier. So, if you're going to design some kind of granting program like the Anti-Poverty Fund to assist this, is it realistic to begin this in the summer of 2020? Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Yellowknife Centre. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we first did these things, I mean, the timelines were a little bit too conservative, and so we listened to the regular members in standing committee, and they said be bold. So this is a little bit bold. I don't think this is actually something that we can't accomplish. I do know that we have a lot of programs within the Northwest Territories that are already offering services, and so I think that we can begin this work in 2020. I don't think this work will be finished in 2020 or in the summer, but we can certainly start it. In fact, we should be looking at internally starting it now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have just one more question in this area, and that has to do with the point below of streamlining early childhood development funding. So how do these two items relate to one another? Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Yellowknife Centre. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is where experience comes in handy. So in my previous role working in NGOs for over 20 years, working with low-income families, and the annual funding that's received has always been an issue especially for NGOs who are small. Their sustainability is not secure. So we're looking at actually expanding the funding so that it would be multi-year funding to accommodate smaller societies, et cetera, that need the security of being able to retain their staff. They don't directly link a lot of community-led initiatives will be in that situation where they don't have the sustainability, they need that guarantee so that they can keep their employees and their programs going, but they aren't contingent on each other. We're looking at multi-year funding, but if people, we're open to ideas at the same time. So it's not just people that are getting services now, we're also looking at expanding it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Yellowknife Centre. For Cam Lake.
Oh, I thought you said Frame Lake. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been a long day. So this page actually makes me very excited. I think there's some really great wins on this page that make me very, very happy to see. The multi-year funding is huge. The single window funding for grants, huge. Training provided for family support workers is also very exciting to me. I do have a couple questions though. Under the first line where to ensure better coordinated services for children and families, I want to make sure that this includes the 1,000 children every year that are involved in child and family services that are generally in higher need of a lot of these services, and that we're really focusing on making sure that those kids have access to the services and the programming that they need. So that would be my first question. Does this include the children of child and family services, with a great big exclamation mark? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Member for Cam Lake. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. Those children are in the care of the government of the Northwest Territories. We have an obligation to take care of those children just as if they were our own children. So my commitment and the commitment of all our cabinet is to working interdepartmentally to make sure that we have the best services for all children, but and it's not one or other, but not forgetting the children that we are in charge of as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Cam Lake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My second question is in regards to wait times for access to assessment and rehabilitation services for children being reduced. At what point does Cabinet intend to focus that on teams that travel the north, on specialists that come and live in communities, versus when they decide they're going to send kids out in order to reduce those wait times? I'm just wondering kind of what our threshold of that measurement is going to be, and is this mandate item going to actually be something that just results in a huge increase in our medical travel costs, and that will be our only way of looking at achieving that? Or are we looking at other ways to make sure that we're providing those services to kids across the Northwest Territories? Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Cam Lake. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll have to get back to the member on that answer. In all honesty, I don't have an answer at this time. The whole idea is that we're going to be working closer together within the departments. There is no guarantee that we won't still need to send children out for medical. So I'm not going to guarantee that it would alleviate our medical travel needs. However, when we have more programs in the communities, there is less need. A lot of the NGOs actually will provide services to people that they don't even come to the government. It's when we don't have any services that it impacts the N.W.T more so. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Cam Lake.
Yeah, I guess just to comment, thank you, Madam Chair. I would never expect a child to not get service because of wait times or to deny medical travel by any means. I just want to make sure that we're looking at ways that we can provide these services to kids in the way that best suits them, and sometimes traveling all the way to Edmonton if you are from YELLOWKNIFE, or if you are from even Yellowknife, or if you're from Ulahuktuk, can be very intimidating and very scary. And so depending on what it is that you're receiving service for, it may actually add to the stress and the anxiety of the child that's receiving the service. So I'm just looking to make sure that we're approaching this from all angles and looking at different options of how we can best serve kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Cam Lake. And Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, one of the examples of program that we have that is working, and we should look at moving it forward, is the Integrated Service Delivery program that's offered. That program is it's like a one-stop shopping. You get one worker and then they get taken to where they need to. They had done a research within that program to validate the need of it, and they found that it was just unreasonable to expect that one family member would have to go to the amount of appointments, the amount of government appointments. So this model, the integrated service delivery model, is a model that is proven to work. And it is a model, it's one model, but we have to work across all departments, and that's why this cabinet is different. This cabinet is doing a lot more consultation between each other, doing a lot more. It's no longer every man and one woman for themselves. It's more of, let's be a team, and so that we carry forward. So yes, we will do our best to try to make sure that as many children as possible don't fall through the cracks, because that's the goal. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Anything further? Member for Cam Lake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the only thing I would add to that is a good news story, and that would be ECE's traveling support team as well that goes into the schools. And I really look forward to seeing where that team goes over the next 3.5 years. So thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Member for Cam Lake. Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to see that the way this is being done in collaboration with Indigenous governments. I do not want to see what happened with the implementation of junior kindergarten, where it almost felt like we were pegging Aboriginal Head Start against junior kindergarten. I also, within the Healthy Family Program, I'm happy to see that there's going to be a Made in the North program, because I've been in the system where this program, since it's been like when I was in my previous career as a nurse, this program, when I was working in Yellowknife, the families that I was working with, it was a good program, but I think as it started to leave Yellowknife and the capacity into the communities, that it didn't hold that same structure, and maybe it was the way that it was being taught or not taught, or so I'm just, one of the things that I know that the Hoditseda did a research on that whole program, so I'd like to know if that's the model going from the research that was done by Hoditseda, which is the SPORE unit for the N.W.T, scientific patient oriented research. They funded that Healthy Family Program review. So do you know if that's coming from that?
Thank you, Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So is the question, there was a review done, and is the Healthy Family Programs operating on the recommendations of the review? Is that the question that I'm hearing? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes.
Sorry, I wasn't so clear. I don't think my time was reset, because I don't think I talked for eight minutes on that either. So I'm gonna let you know that. But no, what I was saying is I think it was in the last year or so that the SPORE unit, Hoditseda, did review the Healthy Family Program, did some research in that. And so I'm just wondering if this curriculum is based on that report or the outcome.
Thank you, Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll ask the Minister of Health and Social Services to address that question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Premier. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's definitely something we look at. I mean, you look at the whole mandate itself to improve early childhood development indicators for all children. And if there's something out there, and our government keeps saying we need to look at strengthening partnerships. You look at the Child and Family Services, the new legislation that's coming out, and here's an opportunity for us to work with Indigenous groups to be able to work together for the best interests of children. And if Hoditseda is doing a research project, something that we could build on, that's definitely something we should have a look at. And if it's working, then why not? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Further questions? Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes.
I do know that the Deputy Minister does sit on that governing board for Deputy Minister of Health and Social Services, Department of Health and Social Services sits on that governing board, so they should be aware of that research project that was done. So I'm just wondering, I just want to make sure that, because they did meet with in the community, like they went around to different communities, and I'll use Inuvik for example, they met with the Healthy Family Program, they met with the Indigenous governments, they met with the Ingamo Hall Healthy Babies Program, they even reached out to the Muslims to make sure that the programs that are being provided are going to reach out to the Muslim families in Inuvik. So that's something that I'd never seen in health before, that reached out to that group, and we do have a lot of them. So I just want to make sure that within this, and we're creating this, that we do look at that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have a commitment by the Minister that she will review the report to make sure. The other thing I should mention is it's in this one, the early childhood development, it's critical that we work with our Indigenous governments. The federal, and thank you for bringing it to my attention, the federal government has made legislation, that actually allows Indigenous governments to draw down the care of their own children. I happen to be an advocate for that. I hate to say it, but across Canada, jurisdictions, public governments have not done a great job of it. So we have one Indigenous government already that is interested in drawing down the care of their children. I'm a big, strong supporter. I'm also a supporter of not setting people up to fail. So I've told the Indigenous governments and anything they're asking to draw down that I will tell them, I will support them, but I will tell them the pros and cons of every issue, so that they make informed decisions based on the best knowledge that they have at the time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Anything further? Inuvik Twin Lakes.
Just one last comment, and I think it just, I know when we went with the daycare in Inuvik, and just some of the early, like the programming for the early child, I know like Ingamo's Healthy Family, they really struggle to keep staff, and we hear that all the time in these NGOs, that they struggle to keep staff because they can't get a commitment longer than March 31st, especially for funding when it's come for child programming. So I really look forward to seeing how this is going to be multi-year funding, so that we can ensure that people get these jobs, and we're training all these early childhood providers, they come back and take these jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad the member agrees with me. Coming from the NGO world, I know that at least for the last, 25 years, NGOs have been asking for multi-year funding. I am glad that this will be a government to bring this forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Next on my list is the member for Frame Lake.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Well, that last piece of news from the Premier was quite good. Just a couple of points I guess I'd like to make on this section. I'm just wondering if the Premier, this has been raised in the House before by the member for Yellowknife Centre, by myself. Is there a role in the early childhood development and Child and Family Services for a child and youth advocate? We're the only jurisdiction in Canada that doesn't have one. And is that something that this government is going to look at? Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Frame Lake. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My Deputy Minister is feeling like he wants to talk for a while, so I'll let Minister Martin Goldnese have the chair for a minute.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Mr. Goldney.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to advise that's something that we're actively looking at right now, or what are the options for the potential establishment of that role. But we're also mindful that we live in a unique jurisdiction as well, so we don't want to just adopt the same practices that everybody else is doing. We're also aware that As was mentioned previously, the landscape is changing as far as who might be delivering these programs and services, and maybe there's an opportunity to come up with a made in the N.W.T approach to improving accountabilities for the delivery of programs and services related to children. And maybe that means something different in our context, something that would provide a different type of accountability directly to Indigenous governments that might not be the same type of model that is used in other jurisdictions. It's very early days in that work now. We're just doing the jurisdictional scans and looking at the potential for other approaches. And some of it might be innovative solutions for our circumstances here in the Northwest Territories. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Goldney. Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Well, let's keep the good news rolling here. No, I'm very happy to hear that because it was something that was consistently raised in the last Assembly. And if those options can be shared with Standing Committee, that would be great. I see some heads shaking, but I'll let them respond at the appropriate time. We do have other, like we've just established the Office of the Ombudsman, and I think we have, I'm not going to, a child advocate in the legal system, so that there are some other, I might not get the title right, but there are some other similar or related functions. So my objective here is to get the function covered somehow, so that there is some oversight and someone independent who can look at the whole system and how it works, and help keep us on track in terms of the Auditor General's report and the action plan that's been developed by Health and Social Services and so on. So, yeah, can the models or approaches be shared with Standing Committee before they're finalized by Cabinet? Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Frame Lake. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely, we'll share the models with the Standing Committee. I do want to point out, though, within the last month, I believe it was, might be a little bit more, I had a constituency meeting, and I believe that there was foster parents that were actually told to come to my constituency meeting. So the foster parents came and they shared a whole bunch of issues with me. The people that asked them to come to my constituency meeting didn't realize I was a social worker, I'm thinking. So I engaged with them because these are the people I work with every day. When they talked about a child advocate, because they were saying, we need a youth advocate, we need a youth advocate, and I asked them, what is that? What do you need? They were talking about all kinds of things, Madam Chair. They weren't talking about a youth advocate. They were looking at an appeal process, a grievance process, a process to help the foster parents. So I think that the first thing we need to do when we look at this is actually ask the people. Ask the stakeholders who are providing services, the people receiving services, what do they want to see, not with the title. What do you need to help you? And then from that, from the words of the people, then we should be defining what the role is. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I would expect that our government would engage with foster parents in terms of what and how this office might be set up and so on. But I think it would be important to not start from ground zero, but to have the kind of jurisdictional scan and best practices piece of work, maybe as a discussion paper, just like what you guys did with the post-secondary education legislation. You know, you went out and did a jurisdictional scan and some best practice stuff, and the Premier knows this because it's something that she did in her previous life, so in the past Assembly. So. Yeah, I think we're getting close to being on the same page here, so that's good. The last item I want to mention is, I'll confess I don't know a lot about the Early Childhood Development Indicator. I think it's on about a 3 or 4 year cycle in terms of when it's done in the schools. So I think it's going to be hard for us to show progress even within the term of this Assembly. And this is something that work that needs to be done over a period of time to get us where we need to go. So I guess what I'm looking for is some interim targets, measurables in this section. And what I want to do is just get you to flip the page for a moment and look at universal childcare, where there are some clear targets here. I wish there were a few more, but 25 new spaces, 20 licensed childcare spaces, an increase by 5%. What I want to encourage you folks to do is to think of what the measurables and targets are that you want to, that is going to help us get to where we want to be at the end of 4 years and leading to the long-term progress we need to make, because that's not in here. So it's going to be hard for us to keep you guys accountable and for you to report on progress. So trying to work together. So just think about some clear measurables for this one in particular. That's all I've got. Thanks, Madam Chair. But if the Premier wants to respond, I'd be interested in hearing that. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Frame Lake. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have some deliverables in here. A new curriculum will be evaluated. The reporting curricula will be developed. Training will be provided for family support workers. There is some in here. I recognize that there would have been nice to have numbers, etc., like in some of our other ones. Early childhood development is a passion of mine. I know it's a passion of many of our members and cabinet members sitting around the table here as well. Education is a passion. We won't let this drop. However, I do appreciate the members' note. This is, if we provide services now, the outcomes for those children, if we provided the best service, won't show for years. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Next on my list, I have the member for Tune-a-Day-Will-a-Day.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to carry on from what for Frame Lake just mentioned. A lot of the results we won't see for this item won't be seen for years. But what I will say, this made me feel really good. Just again, it's. You look at some of the most developed countries on the planet, some of G8 nations, the Scandinavians are light years ahead of the rest of the world. What they do is they throw their resources behind their kids, and you could see it now. Like they've done it a couple generations ago, and you could really see it now. And they're way ahead of the rest of the world in terms of having their kids educated, their economy. It shows in their economy, and this is it. This is one of the most proactive things we can do, I think, on our list. What I did notice in here, I think, that caught my eye, or lack of it, was there wasn't too much mention about small communities. You always got to remember, whenever we have set goals, always remember that we think about our most vulnerable sectors, regions. To get some of these programs into the small communities, it's so important, and I think I just want to see if we get some sort of commitment from the Premier to get to have this as a KPI to watch or key performance indicator by region, to closely monitor this. I think that really, once we have this in place, we need to really closely monitor over time, so that we could closely track, and if there's a region left behind, you could get behind it and make changes as they go along, rather than finding out when it's too late, that realizing there might be a region or a small community behind. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, member for Tune-a-Day-Will-a-Day. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now I'm going to make a commitment that the department better take note of. I agree with you. We have to make sure that every region has these supports. This is key. Scandinavia is way ahead of us. I'm thinking that a lot of politicians, wise politicians in the day in Scandinavia, made the choice of looking for the future versus look at me, I'm Gloria, look what I can do in my 4-year term. And I hope that all members will actually think about that as we move forward, because that is the answer. So we will start to track. I have a personal investment to make sure that all children have services as best as we can provide. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Any further points? Member for Tune-a-Day-Will-a-Day? No. Are there any further comments on page 24, improve early childhood development indicators for all children? Seeing none, we will move on to page 26, advance universal childcare by increasing the availability and affordability. Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes.
The one, Madam Chair, one of the questions that I just wanted to, I know we talked about it in the way we do business, and I think it was allowing for clients that live in low-cost housing, N.W.T. Housing Corp, to run businesses out of their homes. So would running a child, because we want to increase the amount of licensed childcare spaces, so would this priority help to do that by, because we know there's a lot of aunties and uncles and grandmas that probably do this already, but if we were able to do it and they were be able to be licensed and actually, you know, so that they could take in kids and make some money and provide an income, is this part of this priority? Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes. Madam Premier.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. If you look at the third bullet, it's amend our income assistance and housing programs to allow for delivery of licensed childcare programs. The reason I insisted on license within that, this was one of my, is because there's money with having licensed childcare. There's quality control with having licensed childcare. And people on income support and in housing programs too often are forced because of government red tape, government policies that aren't people-friendly, that say you have to hide if you want to have an extra income, if you want to support your grandchild, or etc. So this hopefully will open that up, allow small businesses to develop, allow caregivers in the homes to actually access funding to support children, and allows quality program that we can monitor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Anything further, Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that just kind of leads into my next kind of question. Would there be support from the government, the departments, to help do choose to want to set up childcare in their home? Because knowing what little bit that I do know, not that I ever ran a daycare out of my house, feels like it sometimes, but I know that there's a lot of rules, and you know, and so are our housing going to meet those criteria? Our housing unit's going to meet some of those criteria to open up a registered child, you know, to have it in their home. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, we will be reviewing the policies, but I do know that being the Education Minister before and actually operating daycares before, is that the policies for a licensed daycare facility are a lot more stringent than for a licensed home provider. And there is startup fees within education, culture, and employment to assist daycare providers to not only become access to funding, but also to support so that they can actually ensure that they're successful in becoming a licensed home daycare provider. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Further questions? Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes.
No, thank you, Madam Premier, for that. I know that in just in my region alone that there's one early childhood. I'm not really sure of what their position was, and I know it just recently became vacant. In my community, could keep that person busy. It does keep that person busy, and they do have to travel to the communities. So I'm just wondering, with that position that is in I don't know if it's in all region. There's like the early childhood. It's under EC&E. It's in the department. If they could do more education as soon as this kind of goes live with housing and doing that partnership to say, you know, if you do this, you know, there's money here, we can, just that communication that we're really bad at as government. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes, Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll let my Education, Culture and Employment Minister answer that because he's taken over from my old position. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the position is early childhood consultant, and there's one in each region, and they do work very closely with any childcare providers or potential childcare providers. So this information, I guarantee it will make it to the people it needs to make it to, because that's what these people do, and they have very good relationships in every region with all the providers, and they're mandated to develop those relationships if they just come into the position new. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Further questions? No further questions from Inuvik Twin Lakes. Member for Cam Lake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. My first being in regards to after-school care. So after-school care is a form of childcare, and within the Northwest Territories, the ratio for adults to children for after-school care is different than the ratio for pupils to teachers. But a lot of times our after-school care takes place in our schools. And so a student could walk out to their locker, get a snack, their teacher leaves the classroom, a child care provider enters the classroom, and all of a sudden you're only allowed to have half as many students in that room. And so I'm wondering if we're prepared to also make this part of the conversation is the ratio for kids to childcare providers for after-school care within our school facilities in the Northwest Territories. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Cam Lake. Minister for Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you. I can assure the member this is part of the conversation. I've had those conversations. If we look at creating more using perhaps some of the spaces available in some government infrastructure buildings, like schools. So a lot of schools aren't at capacity, and they have a lot of room. Perhaps some spaces like that could be repurposed for childcare. And so if there's a child care center in a school and there's other adults in the school, perhaps that ratio is something that can be looked at. In terms of after-school care, if you have all of the adults who would be assisting a classroom, you know, the principal could come in, other teachers could come in, support assistants could come into a classroom. If they're all gone, then that ratio becomes more important, because if there's only the employees of the after-school program and no other adults, you know, in the vicinity who can come in to help out, that becomes a concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Cam Lake.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm definitely game to continue having more conversations about this with the Minister of Education. Another concern of mine has to do with the same type of thing, and that's after-school care again in schools, and that's around the rules. So, and I get that it's a safety concern, but if a child is sitting in a classroom playing with blocks and there is an outlet on the wall that is open, as soon as that becomes an after-school care facility, my understanding is the rules change and all of a sudden those outlets need to be covered. But the students didn't touch the outlets during the day when they were with their teacher. The odds of them touching the outlet all of a sudden after 4 p.m. So I'm wondering if the minister is also willing to have discussion about those types of rules that would make sense in a daycare setting, but when the students are in a school for after-school care purposes and the safety of the students is paramount during the day when the teacher is there, and the standards are paramount when the teacher is there, why that changes after school I'm unaware of, and so I'm wondering if we can also add that to the discussion of things we could potentially change as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Cam Lake. Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy to look at all of those kind of things. You know, earlier in the mandate, it doesn't follow my department, but we talked about reducing red tape, and sometimes there's regulations that need to be re-examined. Safety is always going to be paramount. There's no two ways about that, and I think everyone's going to agree. But if a rule just exists to exist, it's something we need to reconsider, perhaps. So I'll promise to look into all of those kind of issues, and I'm happy to sit with the member and you know, hear about any more of these types of issues she has, because clearly she's put some thought into it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry, but yes, thank you, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Member for Cam Lake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My last question. So our priority here is advance universal childcare by increasing availability. So we've definitely discussed that. The last part of that sentence is and affordability. So I'm wondering if the Premier can speak a little bit to how my constituents are actually going to feel that childcare is more affordable with these types of changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Cam Lake. Madam Premier.
So thank you, Madam Chair. The reality is that we have 22 priorities, and we've said that when we made those 22 priorities, we didn't have all the information. We made the best decision on what the information we had, but we didn't have all the information at the time. So I've said it over and over, we're not going to have enough money to meet everything. We know that. However, for me, and I'm making a judgment call here, the availability of childcare versus the affordability, and affordability needs to be taken into consideration, but universal childcare versus available childcare, my priority is having childcare in communities. When we talk about affordability, Madam Chair, higher income families usually don't need to have subsidies. The lower income families all qualify for childcare subsidies. So not only do we subsidize the daycare providers between, I think it's 15 something to $45 a day, depending on the needs of the child, we also will provide subsidies to parents who are low income and need that extra support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question for the Premier has to do with the commitment to better utilize N.W.T infrastructure for early childhood program space. Can the Premier tell us what she has in mind with this commitment? Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Yellowknife Centre. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some places in these mandates spell me all over the place. So we're looking at a hub model. The Minister of Education, Culture and Employment had talked about using new school builds. If we're going to be doing new school builds, or if there's schools that have rooms, why aren't we using them? We have, and this will not only deal with, in my opinion, it won't only deal with the availability of childcare. It'll also hopefully deal with the trauma that comes from people that experience residential school syndrome. We have a lot of children that aren't attending school because of fear from parents, fear of what the school system is. So if we start early and we have their daycare programs, their parenting programs, maybe their immunization shots in the schools, we're hoping that'll kind of socialize the families so that the schools aren't seen as a bad thing anymore, actually turns into a positive way of looking at it. The other thing too is looking at buildings that we have. There's a lot of buildings that we say we don't need anymore as the government. Maybe we need to, instead of just saying we're going to put them out there or rip them down, and start looking at it and saying, is there a way we can use this space? Can we use that building and offer it to an NGO so that they can offer a childcare program or a parenting program or whatever it may be? So it goes right across from new builds with schools to current infrastructure that we currently have, and how can we best use that space to meet the needs of children and families. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Premier, I think that having that kind of flexibility is a good idea. There's a new school build forthcoming in my riding, the new J.H. Sisson School. I've talked in the past about the possibility of having space there for childcare. The point there is to provide the space and then to advertise for a service provider. So is there any chance that there will be space in the new J.H. Sissons for childcare? Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Yellowknife Centre. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would have to get back to you on that one. I do know that the planning during the last assembly, at the end of it, was starting to begin on that school. So I'm not sure, because I'm now not the Education Minister, I'm the Premier, I'm not sure where that stands at this point. So we have to get back to you on if that's a possibility or not. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Yellowknife Centre.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Premier. I'll take a commitment for you to return with that. My next question has to do with evaluating the early childhood scholarships and early childhood staff grants that were part of the bilateral that is expiring at the end of March. There's a point here to evaluate that until spring of 2023. I just can't make sense of the timing there. If the bilateral finishes in 2020, why would the evaluation then take an additional 3 years? Or am I confusing two different programs? Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Yellowknife Centre. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the work won't just, it's going to be completed by 2023. It's not starting there. Perhaps should have had a beginning in this one. But we already know, in all honesty, so it's always good practice to do an evaluation. That's just good practice. Best practice says to do that. But we know that the early childhood scholarships are working already. We know that people are taking advantage of it. We know that there's a huge need for early childhood providers in the communities. So this work is already beginning, be completed then. But as long as I'm the Premier, this is something that is shown to work. I know that I believe it's coming up at the end of this year for the new agreement with the federal government. And so I'm hopeful that the minister will bring this forward to the federal government and show the applicable minister that it is a program that we need to support. Right? Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Yellowknife Centre.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. What I would like to see is that the results of this bilateral that's about to expire inform the next bilateral that's going to be negotiated. And if it turns out that the scholarships and grants are useful, then that's great. If it turns out that they're useful, but there are other possibilities that would also return good results, such as some kind of subsidy for the operator, for the parent, for construction, whatever, then I'd like the minister to be open to the bilateral covering not only what has already worked, but what might work in the future. So that's a comment more than anything. I think this is my last question, and it has to do with the number of licensed childcare spaces added each year. Can the Premier tell us now how many children are without childcare spaces who might use those spaces if the service was available? So what's the gap between the number of spaces available now and the number that are needed? And how does 20 figure into that? Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Yellowknife Centre. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To my knowledge, we don't have that figure. And in all honesty, Madam Chair, that would be a hard figure to actually get because of the underground childcare provisions that is being provided in communities. People often don't see when they bring their children to their grandmothers, they don't see that as, often they wouldn't count that as I need childcare because grandma's looking after the baby. So it's kind of like counting the number of homeless people. So it is difficult to assess that. So currently we don't have those figures. But we do know, in Yellowknife alone, we have wait lists on daycares. So we have those numbers that the NGOs or the applicable daycares are providing us, and I believe them that we have wait lists. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Yellowknife Centre.
Yeah, the situation in Yellowknife is unique. I spoke with a woman yesterday who put herself on the wait list as soon as her pregnancy was confirmed, so that there was some possibility of obtaining timely childcare by the time she went back to work. So the situation in Yellowknife is very bogged down, and space is a really key part of that question. So that's a comment. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Yellowknife Centre. Madam Premier?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take that as a comment. I know that the member is a big advocate for this as well as I am. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you, Madam Premier. If there are there any further questions to improve or advance universal childcare by increasing availability and affordability? Seeing none, committee will move to page 20, is it 26? No, 27, sorry. Where am I? Oh, I jumped ahead. Did I? Oh, okay, sorry. We'll move, are we moving on to the, okay, sorry. Increased student, sorry, we'll be moving on to increased student education outcomes to the same level as the rest of Canada. Questions? Member for Cam Lake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got, I think, one quick question. Under the first mandate item, under how we will do it, it says ensure distance learning opportunities are available in all N.W.T communities. Does that include available to all N.W.T students? Thank you.
Member for Cam Lake, Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The distance education learning is a unique program. It's not the traditional distance education learning that people from southern jurisdictions usually think about. You know, you apply out online, you get a package in the mail, you send them in, and you get graded, and the results are really poor because a lot of people don't finish the courses, in honesty. This is actually a different program. It's to make sure that the higher levels. So within small communities, they're only allowed, and I can't remember because I'm 60 years old, so what we called the different subjects were different. It was 10, 20, 30, but now they don't use those terms. So, it's within the smaller communities, because of the capacity of teachers, they've only been allowed to take the lower grades of education. So this distance learning allows students, to actually take the higher levels of studies. So is it available to every student? No, distance learning in this form is not. This distance learning form is specifically for the smaller communities where they don't have teachers that can actually teach the higher levels of education. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Cam Lake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Within the small communities, is every student within those small communities that the programming is targeted to able to take the distance education or the distance learning? Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Cam Lake. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It almost feels like a trick question or something. So my understanding is that any student that is interested or has the capabilities to be able to take the higher subjects would be allowed those opportunities, just like any other student in any other school in the Northwest Territories. So, but not all students would be interested. They have the option, but not all students want to be a brain surgeon or go to university. Some students are more interested in trades, and that's why we also have the Pathways program. So it's about picking out where students want to go. Some students, like my one son, decided to take all the lower grades, and now he's paying the price. So hopefully all students that are interested, Madam Chair, all students that have the abilities would be promoted to take this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Cam Lake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my concern a little bit is if I was doing right now what I thought I wanted to do in grade 9, I would not be sitting in this chair right now. So if a student decides in, say, grade 11 that they want to take advantage of distance learning, but they had not identified that to their Pathfinder in grade 9 or in grade 7, is that still an opportunity that they can take advantage of? I just want to make sure that we're being realistic with the expectations of kids, and that kids can decide that they would like to be on a different path, and we're not pigeonholing them into a box in grade 7 or grade 9 because they said in grade 7 or grade 9 that they wanted to be an astronaut, and then they come back and say, I'd like to be a welder. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Cam Lake. Madam Premier.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Thank you. We need to be flexible within this model. The member is absolutely correct. How many children have said when they were 12 they want to be a fire truck driver? And then how many fire truck drivers do they end up producing? So the whole idea of the pathways isn't to just say this is where you're going to be and you're stuck in that. We're not a communist society. We're a democratic society. So it's about helping children where they are, giving them goals, showing them that education is key, especially in the smaller communities where they're struggling to see the future. And then if they change their mind, then we need to be there to support them to do that, because the stats show that children nowadays will change their careers. I believe it's between 7 and 9 times in their careers. It's not the luxury of when I was young, when you could get a job and you could keep that job forever. Those days are gone. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Next on my list, I have the member for N.W.T.
No, just in regards to the addressing our social passing that we have in our communities, that big concern for myself. I think we should be doing more assisting the local DEAs and helping them to implement and getting kids, getting kids to school is the big one. And they're trying to find ways to motivate our young youth to get to the school. And speaking with the principal last week in Tuck, that's what he's working towards. And then I'm trying to give him a hand, but our local DEAs are really suffering, that really need assistance. Is there any plan in regards to addressing the concerns under social passing to assist local DEAs? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, member for N.W.T. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. The last bullet on how we will do it says we're going to implement new programming to assist schools and parents when making decisions about student placement, promotion to the next grade, or retention. When we say assisting schools and parents, the part of schools, the Department of Education, Culture and Employment does not operate physically every single school. That's why we have DEAs. So they are part of the picture. We see them as our partners. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. More questions, member for N.W.T.
Madam Chair, just one. No, in regards to that, Madam Chair, that it's saying 21, 22 with that programming coming forward. Is there any way that we're going to be getting in there into the schools earlier, working with the local DEAs and the minister's office to make something happen in regards to the social passing part and getting kids to school, and maybe some extra money somewhere if we could find it? It's like anything else. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, member for N.W.T. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so when it says the fall 2021 to 22, the school year, it will take a little bit of time. We have to develop the program. There'll be some feedback. They'll be working with the education boards, districts, etc. So this work it's not going to be that we're only going to start it either in 21 or 22. It'll be an ongoing process. By that time, what we're looking at is by at least fall 2022, we will have the program up and running and as it says in here, we will be monitored and progress will be reported. So the program under this timeline says it will be implemented by then. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Any further questions, member for N.W.T.?
No, just in regards to the distant learning, in regards to making sure we have access in internet service into each of the communities, in the smaller communities, is a big asset, making sure that kids are able to get online for the online courses, because not all of our schools have grade K to 12. Just making sure the kids that are getting an opportunity to, to try to do what they want in regards to, taking their own with the parents' education. That's so important, because if you don't have your education, you don't have nothing. And then we always say the kids are our future, and then making sure that we're able to help them to get success in school, and that would be a real good thing, especially with the distance learning and giving the opportunities. Thank you, Madam Chair. More of a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, member for N.W.T. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that the Department of Education, Culture and Employment has been working on implementing distance learning every single year to bring more and more schools. I believe there's 5 new schools on the plate for this coming up? Yeah, so there will be 5 more schools, 5 more communities actually accessing distance learning, and the goal of the government is to actually to make sure that every small community has this option if they don't have other options for schools. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Next on my list, I have the member for Inuvik Twin Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the ensure distance learning opportunities available to have all the schools by 2022-2023 school year, can you just give me, how many schools do we have currently connected? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, member for Inuvik Twin Lakes. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a number in my head, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll ask the Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you. In the current school year, there are 15 schools, or 15 communities, I guess, that are part of the Northern Distance Learning Program, and 5 more will be added for the 2021 school year, and exactly which schools is still being determined.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really wanted to just, in this part here, I know when the Inuvialuit Regional Corp started this pilot, it started from teleconferencing on a phone, moved into video conferencing, and it is now what it is today. And when the government decided to fund this, I remember as the chair of the BDEC, I sat there and I sat with a bunch of DMs that were in a room that I specifically said, so I'm going to say it here, I do not want the teachers to be teaching these courses from Yellowknife, because my experience with this program is a lot of the teachers in the Beaufort Delta, or even if it was, in the South Slave and Hay River, a lot of those teachers come from the small communities before they come to the regional, because it's always like, we'll get to Aklavik or we'll get to Tuck, and then in a year or two there'll be movement or a mat leave, and then we'll get into Inuvik. And then, so they spend a lot of time in the communities supporting a lot of these kids. They know a lot of these kids, and they understand what they have. And so I know that was one of the selling things, that when we sold it to the DMs, that they need to continue to teach it out of Inuvik because they have the experience. And so I just want to make sure that by expanding this, that we're making sure that the instructors and because if we have the instructors there, you just have to have the support in the communities for those students. And I just want to make sure that I can get that commitment here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, member for Inuvik Twin Lakes. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. They used to do it for free, and now we're paying for it? Is that what I heard? So that was just a plug. The model, I believe, is working in Inuvik. It's very successful. I don't know why we would change it, but I will ask the Minister of Education to make the commitment that it would stay in a program that's working. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you. I was just up in Inuvik at East 3, and I visited the class, one of the classes that this is offered from, and the experience and the knowledge that staff has now from running this program for a number of years is invaluable. And I just had that discussion with my department the other day. And the whole point of this is to offer courses that would maybe not otherwise be offered, where there might not be enough students to take a course. And in Yellowknife, that's not really an issue. If you have a chemistry 30-1 course, it's going to be full. The economy of scale is there. So I think that when we expand, it would be taught out of places like Hay River. Like, it would be taught out of Inuvik. It would be taught out of places like Hay River. We have to remember we're limited by the staff the teachers that they have in Inuvik. If there's not, say, an art teacher or for a year, then we can't offer that through Northern Distance Learning. So the more participants we have, I think the better, and the wider our offerings can be, and we can perhaps accommodate better to different scheduling. Different regions have different schedules. So I don't foresee this being taught out of Yellowknife. This is, that's not the market, and it's not free to set this up either. There's infrastructure costs in every community that offers Northern Distance Learning, and there would be no point to set it up in a school in Yellowknife where it wasn't even needed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think I was, maybe I wasn't as clear. I wasn't saying that they would have a class here that's, I think it was keeping the teachers and the infrastructure to teach the small communities in Inuvik, and so I'm happy that, and it kind of goes to our other, that I think, I don't know if we got in there, the regional, making sure that stuff stays in the region and is not in Yellowknife. Yeah, so I'm glad that. The other one is, same with my colleague, as a past regional chair of the High Arctic, every single board meeting that I sat at, it came up, social passing. And the inclusive schooling specialist hated when everybody, and she tried to tell us the definition and ensure that we call it's inclusive schooling, but to everybody outside that's not in that profession is social passing. And any of us that have grown up in the North know that it's not always been like that, and so we don't understand it, and the smaller communities even have a harder time understanding it. And so I think as we move kids along, and this is where I found that in the communities that were smaller, like in my region, the Sigachik, the Sax Harbor, Holituck, the smaller communities, they couldn't understand why we couldn't put high school teachers teaching high school courses, but they didn't realize that their kids they were 16, 17, but they weren't working at that level. So I think we have a lot of work to do, and we tried to do it as a DEAs, but even with the DEAs, sometimes they had a hard time understanding. So it's more of a comment under this is, as part of you moving forward, it's going to be really important with the small communities outside is how do we communicate this, and how do we have the teachers understand that they don't understand it. So when they're working and they're moving kids along, they really need to have that dialogue. That passing and placing doesn't make sense to them. It's, it's almost like you need to say, they didn't pass because they didn't meet, they're not at this grade level. So it's up to you, we'll have the discussion. We can move them with their peers, or they could stay a year in this grade. It's almost that basic that I think we have to make sure that they understand, because we use all these terms, and I know as a health provider, I use all these acronyms all the time, and even my notes to my husband and my kids, they finally got used to shorthand because that's all I'm used to. So I think that's what we have to make sure we do when we're teaching that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. Communication is something we need to work on with this, and we need to work with our partners, the DEAs, on doing this. I want to be clear, though. I will not support this government just saying there will be no more social passing, period. There are children out there, and my niece is one of them, that has disabilities to the point that she will never be sitting behind these chairs. She will have obstacles for the rest of her life. She is so proud. She got a completion certificate. So she is like holding that up. She can't get a job, but she has that. So there are children, is what I'm saying, Madam Chair, that if you hold them back, will stay in grade kindergarten, JK, for the rest of their lives. Is that fair to our students? So there has to be an informed decision by parents based on we need to do better of communicating, but we also have to make sure that we're not losing the most marginalized of our children in this new way of doing business. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Next on my list, I have the member for Trinidad-Willowday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we did our briefings and just after we got sworn in, the stat kept playing in my head like over and over, and it's almost like a nightmare now. But it's the rates for high school graduation rates for Indigenous populations and small communities, and in 2018 graduation rates are 33% in small communities, and well, that made me sad. And you look right below that stat I have in front of me right now is there was really steady attendance rates for right from kindergarten to grade 9. All of a sudden, for the key grades where your grades are on a transcript, it just significantly drops. I have in front of me from like 82% attendance rates, all of a sudden it goes down like 70%, and that's pretty significant. I'm just wondering, that's a big disconnect. You know, I think if we could. Especially, I know in my writing, attendance is not great, and we're only having 1 or 2 people, sometimes no kids graduating in a given school year. And a big part of that, in my interviews with the teachers, and them telling me, is the kids are not coming to school. And we're trying to, some schools would be creative and innovative to try to get the kids to school. Like, you know, if you hit a certain attendance benchmark, you get a little prize or whatever. I mean, we got to be innovative. I'm just wondering if there are any sort of suggestions you had, Madam Premier, and trying to help out get kids into the school, get the attendance rates up, or maybe the minister could have some sort of programs or anything sort of like incentives that they're working on right now. Mr. Chairman, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Willowday. I don't think that that's really addressed in this area, but I'll invite the Premier to respond to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the last Assembly, when I was the Minister of Education, Culture and Employment, the attendance was a huge issue for me and the graduation rates. So I began conversations with all of the education bodies to actually look at addressing that. It's a scary topic for any education body because everybody's wondering, what do I do? Is that my job to actually get them there? It might be your job to actually get them there. I'm not sure. And so that's why when we were talking about daycares and accessibilities, that's why I've been, not from just this time, from the last government, I've been probably one of the strongest advocates to say we need hubs in our schools. We need to start bringing the parents there for daycare programs, for parenting programs, for cultural feasts, for sports events. The more that we can get parents engaged, and that's, I don't know if that's the answer, but I'm willing to try it, and I think we need to try whatever's possible. But I also think that we need to be open, and again, that goes back to my telling ministers, you need to engage with stakeholders, you need to work with your partners, because that's only my idea. There's ideas out there, and I think that all of us have to be open to whatever ideas that we can get to help our children succeed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Trinidad-Willowday.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Madam Premier, for the response. Yeah, I guess I wasn't too clear on that. There wasn't really mentioned in here, but I think it's such a key thing and needs to be mentioned at some point in here. If we get these attendance rates up, even like by whatever benchmark, I guarantee you we'll see the some better KPIs or key performance indicators come up, like graduation rates. I think I know that'll happen. So I'm not sure how we're going to get there, but that's just a comment. My next question is on distance learning and make sure the opportunities are available to all of the N.W.T communities. I know in my writing that it's used a lot in Denis-Nouquin, but not so much in Lutz-Laquelle. It's tough because the internet is not that great there, and when we have our caucus retreat, we're going to get a good taste of that. So download your movies now. But no, I think to do distance learning, you need a really good infrastructure like internet and a really good, really fast internet connection to help to teach distance classes. So I'm just wondering, for those community, because I know that not every community is going to have really quick internet, so I'm just wondering if there's any solutions that the Premier might have for that. Mr. Chair, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Trinidad-Welleday. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there's, and I don't remember which one now, but there is a priority in here about, or a mandate that we're addressing increasing the bandwidth within communities. And it is specific. It's not for communities like Yellowknife where we have lots. It's, although it'd be nice to actually have it quicker, I guess. I don't even watch TV, but but it's definitely for the smaller communities. Again, it has to be a partnership with the private market and also the federal government. We can't do this on our own. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Anything further, Member for Trinidad-Welleday? Are there any further comments on increasing student education outcomes to the same level as the rest of Canada? Seeing none, we will go to enable seniors to age in place with dignity. Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the increased supports for seniors to stay in their homes, I know that they're mentioning more of financial in the mandate, but I didn't really see more of a support for like home care or home support. Is that going to happen in this government so that we have after hours and weekend home support for those who do need it? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So remembering this mandate, those that were in the 18th Legislative Assembly remember what the mandate looked like, and it became a huge document with a whole bunch of checklists, and I don't even think any of us really got back to it. It was so cumbersome. We've tried to keep this mandate more condensed, and so it doesn't have every single thing that we're doing in it, or else it would become a checklist, and we wouldn't be creative any longer. So I do know, I think that we got federal government funding for home care, and so home care will continue. Based on that, I don't know, the Minister of Health and Social Services, did you want to expand on that, or are you okay with that? Oh, you got to wait.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are some things the department's doing now. I mean, we've heard from many of our stakeholders about, our elders don't go to sleep at 5. I mean, there needs to be that aftercare, and that is something that our department is looking into, because we feel the need of having, and right now we're in the process of, okay, what does that look like? So that is something our department is looking into. It will include many things like looking at the collective agreement on some of the staff that don't just work 8:30 to 5. What would it look like? So I mean, it is something we've heard, and it is something that we definitely need to look into. Because I agree, elders don't go to sleep at 5. Bingo's at 7 and finish at 9, and they need help getting tucked in and all that stuff.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Although it doesn't say it in here, and I know we do get federal dollars, home care dollars to enhance home care, and I thank the Minister for her department that they're looking into this, because I really feel that, like Jackie said it before, is we need to keep our elders, especially in our small communities, and so I see them coming to my community and they go right into the long-term care, and they don't need to. And I think there's a study that shows that to be in long-term care, I think you don't need to be in there, I think, more than 8. It should be like the last year to year and a half of your life. And some of our elders are in there 10 years, like that's their residence, because they need some after hours care and they just can't get it in the smaller communities. So I I look forward to that in this government, to seeing how that evolves. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Trinidad-Willowday. Madam Premier?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take that as a comment. I didn't hear a question in it, but thank you for your confidence and affirming that, as many of us believe, that we need to try to keep our elders in the home, and home care is a part of that solution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Are there other comments on enabling seniors to age in place with dignity? Mr. Simpson from Hay River South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I've dealt with a few of those issues over the last few months, and I guess I'm curious as to what we have. I guess for a budget, I guess it would be with the Housing Corporation. Like for seniors to age in place, like we're looking at ramps, we're looking at possibly wider doorways. If there's stairs, we have to have something to assist going up and down the stairs. You know, access to cabinets, safety if they fall. How much help does this government provide? Because I know, just as an example, to put a ramp in place is about probably anywhere between $12,000 to $20,000 outside. Depends on how, you know, whether it's a couple of feet or 4 feet. So that's the question I have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Hay River South. Madam Premier?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do know that we have a few programs, Care Mobility, the SAFE program, the Care Major program, but I'll let the Minister of N.W.T. Housing Corporation expand on that and how we support seniors to age in place. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Minister for Housing and Northwest Territories Housing Corp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we go forward and look at the programs that the Housing Corporation currently has, one of the things I'm interested in doing is that to support the seniors aging in place is that I would like to enter into a partnership with the Indigenous groups in the smaller communities. I find it that honestly, that the red tape that we have and the paperwork that we have, these programs are very difficult to access. So one of the things that I would like to see is partnerships with the Indigenous groups that are in those communities. I would like them to put forward, I want to try this, and I want them to put forward a business plan. If they're looking at, there's 10 ramps that need to be built in Litzoke, and I don't want to keep on accepting applications and program delivering for one program and it costing X amount of dollars. I would like the bands or the indigenous groups in those communities to apply, put forward a business plan so they can say, we're going to take care of these 10 ramps and this is how much it's going to cost, and we could just direct, pay the band and they can go and do the work. So it's just a strategy that I'm thinking of, that we are talking about, but something to try to give funding to the community so they can deliver the programs. I hope that answers your question. And I could follow up with a list of senior programs that we do have within the Housing Corporation. I could forward that over to you.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Hay River South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess you kind of referred more so if it's predominantly Indigenous community. In Hay River, it would be a little bit different. And the other thing is that, you know, you could put up maybe 5 ramps, but a month after, there might be somebody who falls down and permanently disabled, and they're going to need a ramp. So I guess the question is how much funding do we have there available for this? And I guess how accessible is it? Because it seems like that there always seems to be red tape or we have no money. That's usually the go-to answer for the department. So how is this government going to change that and do what we say we're going to do? Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Hay River South. Madam Premier?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the Housing Corporation, I believe, it has a budget of approximately $100 million a year. It's quite substantial. It used to be $80 million, so I just want to make sure that she checks on that and gives you a right figure. I believe it used to be 80, but I think we got an increase in it. The second bullet within our mandates, if you look at that, it says that we're going to amend the N.W.T. Housing Corporation policies to allow more low-income seniors access to housing supports. So that is in our mandate that we will do that. There is money available currently for low-income seniors. We need to make sure we keep our programs affordable, and so I would love to be able to provide universal supports to all seniors. Our demographic is aging quickly throughout the world, so we need to make sure it's still affordable. You can get care mobility funding, I believe, and I'll have to correct if I'm wrong, but it's up to $10,000 per person. You can get the SAFE program, again, up to $10,000. You can get Care Major. I believe that's $25,000 that you can access. Those programs also can be bundled. So our goal is to try to help as many seniors as possible. Like I said, there are programs already in place for low income. We are looking at, our mandate says that we will be reviewing the policies to help more low income seniors stay in place. So that is our commitment. And again, I can't stretch that to say that we will not be for all seniors or elders, because some can afford to buy their own ramps, etc. For example, when I retire from here, do I need to have the support? Probably not. So, you know, those are questions that we have to have. We need to take care of the most marginalized. Most marginalized are seniors, children, but seniors who are low income. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Hay River South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess when I'm reading this on page 29, it says increased supports for seniors to stay in their homes and communities. It doesn't say seniors with money or seniors without money. And I'd like that clarified, because like, what's the cost if, you know, to keep somebody in their home, whether they have money or not? Like if they're going to stay in their home, what is the actual cost savings to this government if we help somebody stay in their home? If we spend, you know, $10,000 or $20,000 a year to keep them in their home, what's the cost if we have to house them in a public housing unit? I think there's probably a big cost difference there, and I would just like to know if we, you know, I suspect that the department looked at it, and I would kind of like to know that number. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Hay River South. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if the department actually did a cost analysis to see what the cost would be, but what I would like to say, Madam Chair, is that you know, sometimes we have to agree to disagree, and on this one I think we have to agree to disagree in that we have to make sure we don't have a lot of money. Our economy is bad. We know that. There's not a member here that does not know that and is not aware of that. We need to make sure that we focus our funding during this time towards our most marginalized. I beg to differ. I think that people that are making $200,000 a year plus should be able to afford their own ramps. And I bet that those people that are making, elders, seniors, that are making over $200,000 will not stay in public housing if they can stay in their own homes. They will pay for that. So our goal is to provide services for as many low-income families, elders as we can, and that is our commitment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Hay River South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree we disagree. Because really at the end of the day, I look at these seniors, even if they've got money, they got a choice. They could stay in the territories or they could leave. And if we don't give them the little bit of support, even to help them and keep them here, like that's $35,000 roughly a year. So if there's two of them, that's $70,000 that we're getting from the feds. So it just doesn't make sense to me to say, no, we're not, like it does, you know, that we can't really help them. And they've been paying taxes you know, and they've been contributing as well all their lives. Just like you know, a senior that maybe that's not as well off. So I see where you're coming from, but at the same time, I guess we've kind of got to look at the bigger picture, because those same seniors that maybe you're saying can afford something also contribute to, I guess, the community as well after the fact. So I think we've got to look at that, and there's a cost associated with it. So when we say we're going to put money into keeping seniors in their place, and we don't really know what the benefit is, then maybe we don't really have to spend any money in keeping them in their place. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Hay River South. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So absolutely, it's not that I don't care about our aging population or seniors as a whole. The reality is that once we take care of our most marginalized people in society, once we can make sure that all low-income seniors have adequate housing, then we should be looking at expanding the income threshold. But we have to start somewhere, and the society is judged by how we treat our most marginalized populations. We have to keep that into consideration. When the economy's good, or we have lots of money, or we've dealt with all the low-income families that are needing services, then yes, we should be expanding. We have 22 priorities. Do I take the money out of one and put it into seniors who are making over $200,000 a year? That is a question that we have to ask. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Time is up for, we will move to Member for Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, in July of 2019, the Minister of Health and Social Services at that time tabled a report on seniors' access to Government of the Northwest Territories programs and services. This was a gap analysis study of what was offered to seniors. So I'm trying to understand then, point number 1 on page 29, it sounds like a brand new gap analysis. And so could the Minister, could the Premier please explain how this work is different than the work completed less than a year ago? Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Member for Yellowknife Centre, Madam Premier.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Honesty is a strength and a weakness, and so I will admit that I didn't know that there was a table report, and so I will commit that all applicable ministers, we will pull that tabled report, and all applicable ministers that have an interest in this will be directed to read that report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that commitment from the Premier. We don't have the time or resources to redo work especially work that's so recently done. At the time that this work was undertaken, what the seniors, N.W.T. Senior Society asked us for was a senior strategy, and instead of a senior strategy, we got this gap analysis. Is there any possibility that within the life of this Assembly that the government will undertake a senior strategy to roll up all of these services for seniors into one place? Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Yellowknife Centre. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to clarify on the last question. Martin did, Mr. Goldney actually clarified for me. I was going to give another information, and said that the report that was tabled last year was more of an internal document done with Senior Society, but we're looking to expand that actually. So this gap analysis would be more working with other partners such as Indigenous governments, etc. That might not be part of one organization. So we'll be looking at that. And as for doing a senior strategy, at this point, I don't want to commit to that. It's not that I don't care, it's that we've got huge amount of mandates that I'm already worried about getting through. So That might be a question on the floor, but at this point, I think I need to stick with the mandates that we've already adhered to. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Yellowknife Centre.
Yeah, thank you. Going back to this report, it's 54 pages long. It was undertaken with a multi-stakeholder group who have responsibility for seniors. So I feel that it is a very robust document. And as I have already said, I would really discourage the government from spending the time and money to do a second gap analysis. So I really urge you to consider what you have in mind in light of the work that's already been done. The next thing I want to ask about is helping to protect seniors from abuse and neglect. It's my understanding that the Government of Canada is looking at changes to the criminal code that will make elder abuse a specific crime. So that's at that level, which we are not at. But I'm trying to understand what review and implement regulatory and service delivery changes required to protect seniors. I'm trying to understand what that point means. Maybe if you have an example, it would help me understand it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Yellowknife Centre. Madam Premier.
Do you know what that is, Martin? Just 1 minute. Sorry, Madam Chair, if my Deputy Minister can answer that question.
Deputy Minister Goldney.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize if I don't get this exactly right because I think we're all a little tired at this point in the day, but my recollection of those discussions was really a recognition that we could be doing more with our programs to ensure that there are the appropriate safeguards in place, because we have heard reports, for example, programs related to the provision of home heating fuel subsidies and making sure that we have those designed so that they're not as prone to potential abuse by family members that might be taking advantage of elders. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Goldney. Member for Yellowknife Centre.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, that makes sense to me that there's some safeguarding around our own programming. I'm just going to finish here with a comment, and it's been my experience from the elders in my life that their lives can change dramatically almost overnight. They can fall and break a hip, and they go from living independently to needing some kind of sustained care right away. That there's just no time to lose. And so they end up going to hospital, which is a really expensive alternative for them, and also one that has a lot of risks attached to it. So what I'm asking for with respect to enabling seniors to age in place in all respects is a great deal of flexibility in the programming so that when senior circumstances change, their needs are met on an expedited basis, that they don't end up having to wait months and years for a solution that fits their new circumstances. So with all of the program offerings, the fact that life changes rapidly for seniors sometimes is something that needs to be considered so that we can respond to them as quickly as possible. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Yellowknife Centre. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I agree. We do need to be flexible in our programs, and I'm hoping that that's kind of covered within service delivery changes required to protect seniors, but also as Mr. Goldney had stated, we need to make sure that our seniors are safe from financial abuse. So that's why one of the actions is actually to make a separate income assistance program specifically designed for seniors and people with disabilities. Again, they are some of our most marginalized populations, and if the systems aren't working as they are, then we need to change the systems. We need to stop putting people in boxes and say, you need to work with the system. We need to change systems for people. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. I will move on to Member for Nunukput.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in regards to increase in seniors' home heating, we've been having a little bit of issues in regards to my home community with the fuel and the amount they're allotted. Just wondering, with the increases in that, I guess people are wanting wood as well. So, which is the department willing to start looking at when the increases come, being able to use it for wood or fuel? That's what I've been asked. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Nunukput. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because we have a new education minister, it would be his decision. I will let the education minister make a decision on that.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Minister for Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll look into it. Thank you. Or thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Member for Nunukput.
Yeah, your dad told me to ask you that question. No. So anyways, no, thank you. The increase in for seniors for the enhance of getting the for single door units in Tuck, right? I have houses in Tuck that have one single door, no safety, no back door. You're going to jump out the window. I have some elders in units like that. And what, with that being said, the safety aspect of that with the housing should not be building any more single door units and putting elders in there is not safe. So if you're going to do that with ramps and stuff, are you going to be doing that on some of the units that you do have, or how does that work now? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Nunukput. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll let the Minister of N.W.T. Housing Corporation address whether she's going to do single doors or not anymore. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Minister of N.W.T. Housing Corp.
Madam Chair, yes, I'd like to confirm that right now the Housing Corporation is reviewing that and looking at constructing our units that they're disability accessible. So we would end up having ramps and then widening the entrances and the doors. But the one door entrance units, that's something I'll also address as well too.
Thank you, Minister for N.W.T. Housing Corp. Member for Nunukput.
Chair, in regards to the creating the new income support assistance program tailored for seniors and persons with disabilities, how does that work in the increasing? It should not be decreased, it should be increased for that, and how, that's happening in 2022. So is there another study going on, or how is that going to work? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Nunukput. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the creating a separate income assistance program tailored to seniors and people with disabilities, it's not meant to actually give more money or more services. It's actually meant to address the issues, some of the issues around, like we had talked about, financial abuse that is happening, making sure that the income support program is meeting their needs. Do they need to report every month? If you've got mobility issues, those are things that they need to be looking at. It's about accessibility of the programming versus actually increasing the amount of supplement. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Nunukput.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in regards to that, I think there should be an increase looked at, because the cost of living, these individuals that are elderly and are people with disabilities do not have the opportunity to work extra, if they're allowed to. So I think if you're going to do that, I think the program established should be monitored in regards to increasing, because the cost of living in the north is only getting up higher and higher with the cost of food and just the cost of living it as a whole. So I think if they're going to do this, they should be increasing in regards to helping our disability and our elders. Because right now, if you're not employed, everybody goes to Nanak and Dadak's, your grandparents' house, to go eat, and they're not gonna say no to you. These are the ones that are hurting the most in regards to that, because they get their pension checks, and it's tough to see in regards to that, because they're utilizing all their monies and that for food to help family, and everybody's like that. You know that, Madam Chair, in regards to how we treat our families back home. So I think something like that, the minister should really take a look at it. It's increasing for our elders. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Nunavut, Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this point, I'm not going to make a commitment that we will actually specifically increase more money for elders or disabilities within our income support program, because I'm trying to remember back now. I believe, and it is late, I am tired, but I do believe that it was only a couple of years ago, if not, that we actually increased, and I think it went from $300 a month to $405 a month for people with disabilities and income support. So again, we have a lot of priorities. It was just increased, so we need to make sure that we can spread the money around as appropriate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Member for Nunavut.
Madam Chair, no, I don't think the Premier has been shopping in our local communities. For $405, you can probably get about 2 or 3 bags if you're lucky. I think that has to be looked at in regards to that. That's just a comment to that. But my next question is the 25 beds that you have in Inuvik at the long-term care facility already, and you're looking at another 44, so that's going to take it up to how much? 40? 48. Wow. That's even. I need some of those beds, Madam Premier. The thing is, what we got to do is aging everybody in our communities. I have some of my friends that watch their parents till they're 99 and 100 years old, and that sacrifice themselves to take care of their mom or their dad. I think aging in place, people, like I said, I brought this up a few times, Madam Chair, in regards to people that are shipped out to Inuvik. Only time you'll see them is at medical. The travel is over $2,000 for some of those return tickets, just for Sax Harbor to Inuvik or Paulatuk or Ulukaktuk. You'll never see the person that's in long-term care unless you're going for medical. I think something has to be done in regards to working with the community, and that's what I'm trying to do, because for me, seeing all those beds in Inuvik, it's good for Inuvik, but the jobs are going to be good. I have no problem with that, but at the end of the day, I want my elders, because as an Inuvialuit, we take care of our elders, and it's really disheartening to see family when you're being pulled away and they know it. And then the only time you said, no, you're going to come home in a box. That's how it works. That's got to change. The mentality of that's got to change. If we could build 6 beds for long-term in Ulukaktuk and maybe 4 and giving 4 in Paulatuk, same thing in Tuk. But the thing is, again, it's really tough to see. This has to be like I said, I have nothing against Inuvik in regards to getting those beds, but at the end of the day, Nunavut needs to take care of our own elders. And as an Inuvialuit beneficiary and working with the Inuvialuit Development Corporation, our government wants to work together with local community governments to do stuff like this. I need this for my communities, Madam Chair. And I need, within the next 4 years, I'm going to have it. That's what I want from our Premier and the commitment. I know you're going to say, no, we can't do that, we're broke. But you got to find money. We're finding money for Stanton. You're finding money for all these other big projects for you guys. 33 communities. We need help. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Nunavut. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a heartbreaking story that you share, and I understand the need to be with your family members. I've got also aging relatives that love dearly. If it was as simple, Madam Chair, as just saying, I will give you 5 beds and you can take care of your own in your community, I would do that right now. I would go down to Quality Furniture or wherever, Brick, and buy 5 beds out of my own pocket and give to the member. The issue is not about the beds. The issue is one of our priorities. We don't have enough staff, health service staff. So one of our priorities is increasing our health professionals by 20%. We don't even have the staff to meet the buildings that we have now. So to expand on a program that we're not doing an adequate job of currently, is that best practice, Madam Chair? That is the question we need to ask. Thank you.
I will go to member for Cam Lake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very happy to hear discussions around a senior strategy being brought up, and also the seniors home heating fuel. So it's nice to know that we're all on similar pages on this side of the house. My first 2 are comments, and then I have a question. My first comment is just in regards to the identifying gaps, and that being in summer 2021. That's our targeted timeline for that. I feel like 1.5 years to just identify where we're not doing enough seems like not enough. And then also in terms of amend N.W.T. Housing Corporation policies to allow more low-income seniors to access housing supports, and not starting that until summer 2021. It doesn't seem like enough to me as well. But those are just comments. But my question is, the mandate item of amending Northwest Territories Housing Corporation policies to allow more low-income seniors to access housing supports. How can we see that the policies are amended if we can't see the policies anywhere online? And is the Premier willing to, or the Minister of the Housing Corporation willing to post the policies online right now so that we can see them as they stand right now? Thank you.
Thank you, member for Cam Lake. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That would be a commitment the N.W.T. Housing Minister would have to address. So I'll turn it over to Minister.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Minister for N.W.T. Housing Corp.
Chair, that's a commitment I am going to make, is that because we are reviewing that right now, and I want those policies online so people can access them themselves. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister for N.W.T. Housing Corp. Member for Cam Lake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That makes me very happy to hear. So I'm happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Trinidad-Willowday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was really happy to see this one and word it the way we did. Dignity is so important. Just before session, we're downtown here in Yellowknife, and saw an elderly lady who was just busy and moving really slow. And I stopped my vehicle. I didn't care if people are ticked off behind me. I stopped my vehicle. I got out and I helped this lady cross the street, and she had a handkerchief on, slow, had a cane, and I took my time, and I talked with her. I joked with her. I said, and she thanked me. She spoke really good English, and but still a little bit of accent. But she said, "Masicho," and I said, "That's all good. You said you're good. You're going to be good for another 30, 40 years." And of course, she laughed out really loud, and I got a good laugh out of her. And that's how you got to treat elders. You got to joke with them, and and talk with them, and make them feel important. And to me, that's what's important. You treat them with dignity, and that's the way I operate. And anytime I see, like, when our elders are having any sort of barriers, it just angers me. It motivates me, I guess. I want to try to do as much as I can. One of the things too with policies here, I see here, like, they're changing policies with the N.W.T. Housing Corporation. I know, for example, they're still having a lot of elders having lots of troubles There's still a lot of mobility issues, and I brought some up in the House, and I know that the minister from the Housing Corporation wanted me to ask some questions, I guess. I still haven't asked, and I still want to let that sit for a little bit. Because it's important. I want to give this a lot of departments let the ministers think. We have to treat elders like royalty, like gold, and that's what they deserve. They brought many of us up, and that's how we should treat them. But going back to what I was saying about amending policies, I like to see a little bit more of that. I know that we made a change for N.W.T housing to help out small businesses, but I want to see a little bit more for enabling, getting more policies and freeing up a little more funding to help out with mobility, for example. I don't know what that's going to look like. I know that we're under some fiscal constraints, but one of these areas I think it's really important, especially with mobility. It helps. If you help elders around their home, be mobile around their home, it'll keep them in their homes longer, and then so we don't have to ship them off, to places like Inuvik. It's not right. So I just want to see if the premier or the minister would be committed. I want to hear what kind of policies what commitments they're going to make in terms of changing policies. I want to hear specifically what kind of policies they're going to change. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Trinidad-Willowday. Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll let the Minister of N.W.T Housing Corporation address the policy changes.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Minister for N.W.T Housing Corporation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Right now, I don't want to display a commitment or specific policies that we are reviewing, because I want to look at them all. I know that there is quite a bit, but then I need them to meet the needs of the Northwest Territories, and I want to work with the programs that we have, because I do hear the members our programs are hard to access. So going forward, as we progress within our department, I will inform the member of the policy changes we are making going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of N.W.T Power. Member for Trinidad-Willowday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit fatigued. I have nothing further. Thank you.
All right. Are there any further questions on enabling seniors to age in place with dignity? Seeing none. Committee, seeing that the time, what is the wish of the committee, Mr. Norn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Chair rise and report progress, Mr. Chair.
All right. Just wait. All right. There's a motion on the floor to report progress. The motion is in order and non-debatable. All those in favor? Put your hands up. I can't hear you. Can't see you. All those opposed? Okay. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So motion is carried. I will now rise and report progress. Sergeant-at-Arms, please escort the witness from the chamber. Should we take a quick
back there. May I have the report of the Committee of the Whole member for Nuvik Twin Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, your committee has been considering table document 17-19 brackets 2 supplementary estimate operation expenditures number 4 2019 to 2020 and table document 12-19 brackets 2 2019 to 2023 mandate of the government of the Northwest Territories, and like to report that consideration of table document 17-19 bracket 2 is concluded, and that the House concur in those estimates, and that the appropriation bill be based thereon be introduced without delay. And Mr. Speaker, I move that the report of the Committee of the Whole be concurred with. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Member for Great Slave. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is carried. Third reading of bills. Third reading of bills. Mr. Clerk, orders of the day.
Orders of the day for Thursday, February 27th, 2020, 1:30 p.m. Prayer, minister statements, member statements, returns to oral questions, recognition of visitors in the gallery, replies to the budget address, day 3 of 7, acknowledgments, oral questions, returns to written questions, replies to commissioner's address, petitions, reports of committees on the review of bills, reports of standing and special committees, tabling of documents, notices of motion, motions, first reading, notices of motion for first reading of bills, second reading of bills, consideration in committee of the whole of bills and other matters, table document 12-19-2, table document 30-19-2, report of committee of the whole, third reading of bills, orders of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. This House stands adjourned until Thursday, February 27th, 2020 at 1:30 p.m.